Welcome everybody back to Character Day 2016. I want to remind everyone that you can ask questions if you like at hashtag Character Day 2016. That's where the conversation is ongoing, in not just with these interviews, but in general. And every half hour, we'll be repeating these conversations with luminaries in all sorts of fields that have to do with character traits and how we build our character on this character day. And apropos of that, today we now have Chris Loo to talk to, who is the program director for an organization called Hackgrassman. And Hackgrassman is, and he can explain this a little bit better than I, but it's a partnership between a group at Intel where Chris works and several other organizations in an attempt to combat or to ameliorate the effects of trolling and harassment online. Chris, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, Chris, can you explain, we talked about this a little bit off camera, and I'd love for you to explain a little bit about what you do at Intel and how you ended up in the position that you're in, because it's kind of an interesting story how that happened.
Well, I don't think it's that interesting, but we'll go ahead and start there. So certainly I have a full-time role at Intel, but for the purposes of this conversation, I really do represent the Hack Harassment Initiative. And the Hack Harassment Initiative kicked off earlier this year, just in January, between Vox Media, Recode, Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation, and Intel. And we all recognized that there was this huge challenge and problem with online harassment, and we wanted to do something about it. So we decided to form this initiative together and reach out and try and be the connective tissue across all the various industries and partners that could do something about it. So both individuals and organizations.
Well, I think part of the interesting part of that story is that, you know, Intel being such a big part of this conversation, that I imagine it's difficult when you are part of the industry that is creating the community in which these things are happening, that there's a certain amount of responsibility, but also I imagine a certain amount of trepidation with confronting what's going on. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the solutions and how you're grappling with this excitement about the internet and the free flow of speech, and what, you know, companies like Intel are providing, and what are the dangers and where we're going?
Yeah, so that's an interesting way of looking at it. So in our belief, right, technology is become completely ubiquitous in the way that we now connect with people. I mean, I'm in Arizona right now, and you're in San Francisco
Right.
Bay Area.
Yeah.
You know, we're more connected now than we ever have been in the past. And if we're going to build that connected world, we have to make sure it's a safe and inclusive one. And I think the Pew Research 40% of internet users have experienced online harassment. And we know that when we're talking about youth, 18 to 24-year-olds, that number jumps dramatically to 70%. And so, you know, when we're thinking about how people are connecting now and in the future, we have the responsibility, you're right, to make sure that we're encouraging the right behaviors, that we're giving the opportunity for technology to be a part of the solution for driving those behaviors in a positive way.
And how can technology be part of the solution? It seems like an enormously complicated problem to tackle, and what are some of the things you're looking at?
Yeah, so certainly at the root of the problem, there is, I would say, a couple of major components, right? We know that behavior is a major component of this, but technology can help us make it easier for people to do the right thing, right? So when we look at problems like online harassment, I think most people right now, they see online harassment, they might navigate away from that page. What's important to remember is that that doesn't really help the person that's being targeted by the online harassment. We know online harassment, even with those shocking numbers, is relatively underreported. And to help that person, we usually rely on a human moderation system. If you happen to be reading that page or someone happens to be kind enough to report the abuse, then we can go and intervene. But without that, it's been tough. So technology, certainly technology like artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms, we think can actually help automate the process of flagging where harassment may be happening and get interventions to those people that need the help a little bit quicker and in a little bit more of a robust way. And that's something that we're looking at doing right now.
And I realize that we've skipped a step a little bit, or I have in explaining. Talk a little bit more about. We talked about how Hackgrassman was organized and some of the things you do, but what is sort of your overall? What are you doing as an organization? What is your sort of activity?
So yeah, let's go ahead and take that step
Right.
back. I'm so excited about what we're doing on the technology front. I often forget to take that step back. So thank you for that.
Sure.
So hacker harassment, and certainly we talked a little bit about how we came to be, but we've kind of taken a three-prong approach. So when we came up with the idea of this, we reached out to various groups. As I mentioned, Vox Media and Recode. They're more in the journalism and media space. The Born This Way Foundation are actively connected to nonprofits and various groups of organizations that are trying to tackle this problem from various angles. Intel obviously connected to a lot of these technology companies. And when we stepped back and said, okay, what could we do as a program that will really move the needle, that'll really help progress? We said, first and foremost, we have to raise awareness of what the problem is. We know that there's a lot of people that have experienced it, but they've experienced it within their bubble. And so really highlighting the impact of that to people and the digital communities that they belong to. Second is we know it's a very widespread problem. There's a whole series of different communities, digital communities, that this is a major issue for. And so we know that we can't do it just the three of us. So we are out there actively trying to find ways to collaborate with various organizations to make sure that we have a more holistic view of where we can have an impact. And then third is try and figure out what are the real solutions that we can implement that'll really start moving the whole initiative forward, all of the communities of communities that harassment exists in. And that's really where we've kind of gravitated to with our technical solutions, which I've kind of already started talking about. So really between those three pillars, we feel like hack harassment can have a major impact on reducing both the frequency and the impact of online harassment in the communities.
Tell me a little bit about how the pledge fits into this three-pronged approach.
Yeah, so just a couple of months ago, we launched our Hackgrassman Pledge. And as it relates to that three-pronged approach, one of the things that we recognized pretty early on, as I mentioned, was that hack harassment lives in so many different areas and it's completely decentralized, whether it be various social media platforms, blogs about journalist blogs, video posting sites, chat apps or emails, things like that, that no one person has control over, but individually, all of us have a collective power to do something about. So the pledge was our way of saying, and recognizing that everyone has a role in doing something about online harassment. And it is a way for people that are interested to say, hey, here's a group that is doing something about it. I want to be a part of that. I'm going to self-select and say, I recognize that there's a problem and I want to do something about it. And so our pledge getting out there is getting people to recognize, hey, there is a problem, build that awareness in themselves and their responsibility, and to be able to stand up and say, I'm ready to do something about it.
Now, how do you, one of the things I'm interested in this space is how the behavior online, I think in the early stages of all this trolling stuff, people were kind of dismissive of 14-year-old kids messing around or whatever. But I think increasingly we see conversations outside of the internet taking on some of the same tenor as what we saw online, which seemed like the only safe place for that to happen. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is to create more positive conversations online and what kind of impact that has beyond just the internet space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's easy to point to things that are easy for everyone to understand, like cyberbullying. I think certainly there's an element of that in everything we talk about. I think looking at that full spectrum of online harassment really helps us think about the framing of the entire problem and what positive conversation can do. So looking at how much it's affected even our Olympians recently. right? And the harassment of people like Gabby Douglas, or journalists who are having to opt out of their chosen profession because of the amount of harassment they get for expressing a point of view online. It really is more than just the normal bullying. Um, it's like a complete uh, absence of understanding that at the end of the day, the interactions that we have online, there's a very real person on the other side of that screen, on the other side of that message, that is receiving that form of harassment. And so there is a need for us to be just a lot more, um, uh, I guess, positive in the conversations that we're having, accepting that there is something, um, and someone on the other side of that screen that's going to be receiving it. And it's very hard on the internet to build that empathy, right? Understanding that, hey, if I agree with someone, that's okay. I agree with them. It's hard to show that. And if I disagree with them, well, it's very easy to go so far and disagree with them and make it a very personal attack. Um, and that's shutting down people's ability to engage. Most of the time, your reaction is, I'm just going to step away from that then. And that's a loss for all of us in the communities. So if we're not encouraging that positive conversation, if we're not encouraging the dialogue that helps bring all those voices to the table, that's a loss for all of us.
Do you think there's a way in which having this sort of safe space for negativity online bleeds over into into offline conversations if people sort of spend all day long and in large groups attacking people and harassing people? Then are we, is there something that then they carry into, now they're going to the grocery store to pick up something, the way that you interact with those people in the grocery store, is it going to be different? Is there a danger that this kind of trolling and harassment, if it becomes the norm, that it'll change the way we interact with people on a day-to-day basis?
So yeah, I think there is a connection, right? I think certainly people have, like I said, due to the fact that it's hard to always remember that there's another person on the other side of that screen. I think there is a challenge with people. Um, I wouldn't go up to someone's face in a grocery store and say a lot of the things that I see online, and that's just a fact. And there may be some people that are comfortable doing that in both online and offline interactions. But I would probably assert that I think most people are a lot kinder face to face when they can look at the person in the eyes and than they are online. And I think it's just a little bit of remembering that that person exists on the other side of the screen, and figuring out how can we encourage people to be as kind online as they are offline, right? I think there are still going to be challenges offline, as there always will be. But I think for the purposes of what we're trying to get to, I think it would be a huge win if we can even get people more to behave as they would face to face.
So to answer a very large question, what can you tell us a little bit about how can we encourage people to be more kind online? Or are there some things that you found that work in your short time as an organization that is starting to have an impact?
Yeah. So certainly, I think, like I said, just the first thing is to remember that you should be as kind online as you are offline, and accepting that diversity of thought, those diversity of opinions. I think the acceptance of that is something that we can all do better at, especially online. Um, I think if we also were to look at some of the things we could do to promote kind of that better behavior online, um, I think one of the key pieces that we've been looking at right now is again, um, kind of understanding even what it looks like when we're interacting online, right, and how that can be received. And so something that we're pretty excited about that we're working on right now is a web app that we're planning on launching in the coming months, that leverages some of that artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to give you a little bit of a holding the mirror up to your own interactions, let's say, and give you a view of here's how you may be received online. And what we're hoping that'll do is really just drive up awareness, right? I think all of us can probably be a little bit more aware about how we're being received. Offline, that's pretty hard to do without people that are very loving and bold and willing to tell you to your face, like, hey, here's how I just received what you just said. The miracle of the internet is that we have all of those interactions captured somewhere. And so, something that I think we can all do to be a little bit better online is let's leverage what we already know about how we're interacting. Let's turn some of that data around on ourselves and build up our own awareness. And so, not ready to announce anything specific yet, but certainly something that we're getting ready to launch in the coming months. So I would say the first and foremost thing is to make sure people are signing that Hackgrassman Pledge, and you'll be the first to get updates.
Great. Yeah, so there's, can you talk a little bit more about where people can sign that Hackgrassman Pledge and where and how they go about doing that?
Yeah, so certainly you can just go directly to hackharassment.com. Right, most you'll see the link to the pledge, and you'll get more information about what we're doing there. You could also follow us on Twitter and Facebook and all the various social media channels. But if you're looking for something that's more I guess engaging in your local communities, especially if you happen to be at some of your local colleges here in North America or Europe, because I know we're speaking to a global audience here. We have a recent partnership with Major League Hacking, which is a group of people that are hosting and helping with hackathons at colleges all over North America and Europe right now. And we are going to be at over 175 different hackathons over the next school year, and at campuses all over the world, trying to find and engage young technologists in ways that we can apply technology to solving some of these challenges. So even if they're looking for something to do beyond just signing the pledge, I would also encourage them to join us at one of those hackathons and really put their skills to the test.
Cool. And it sounds like you're talking about engaging young people, especially in this process and in these hackathons, et cetera. And I imagine in general, for this to take hold, it's going to start with young people, because it's just like any conversation. I mean, when you're a kid, you're learning how to talk to adults, or you're learning how to deal with problems. Talk a little bit about the importance and the focus on young people and their interactions online.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll be as bold to say that young people run the internet nowadays, right? I mean, it's their world. They're more connected. There's almost no division between how they interact online and offline. Any of their friends online are as real as their friends offline, and most of their friends offline, they're connected more often online than they are even offline, face to face. And we know that the way that they're growing up is different than any other generation, right? Millennials have defined what will be the future for technology already, and they will continue to be. So I think engaging them in this conversation, making sure that they have a part in building the internet that they want, and all these social interactions is going to be very, very critical. And so we're looking for any way that we can to make sure that we're capturing their voices in this process.
One of the things I often think about with young people and the internet is that, when I think one of the problems of being a teenager especially is that you're sort of caught in this world feeling very powerless, sort of over your body, you're physically changing, and certainly you're starting to feel like you should be more independent, but you're still, going to school and you have to follow these rules. Do you feel like part of what's happening online with young people is that they feel some sense of power, that's part of it? And is there a way to change that to something positive where they feel like they have power and control, but it's not like negative control over another person?
Yeah, I can see where you're going with that. I haven't really looked at it through that lens specifically, so that's an interesting way to think about it. I do think that there is an element of that. So certainly another powerful thing about the internet is it's a great equalizer. Doesn't matter if you're a teenager or if you're an adult or if you're in a different country, your voice is your voice on the internet. And there is an empowering nature to that. And I think it's very important for all of us, but especially during those critical ages, to understand what that responsibility is for your voice and making sure you are a force for good. I will say, though, that I've been very positively encouraged. Every young person and millennial I've talked to has this sense of hope and empowerment already. And I think, maybe if there was a way to capture that from just their character and their positive personality in an offline connection, if there was some way to translate that and make sure that they knew what they could do online, that was positive as they were engaging with other people, and that their responsibility is to take care of one another online as much as it was offline in these digital communities, I think we would have something really interesting to think about there.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris, for being with us today. And can you talk a little bit, we've talked about this throughout the interview, but maybe just finally remind everybody about your hashtag and where they can go and what they can do.
Sure. So certainly follow us, hashtag Hackharassment. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Go to hackharassment.com and sign our pledge there. We'll be excited to see you at all of our local hackathons, as well as interact with you online. But thank you for inviting me and having me on. Keep doing what you're doing. This is great. I heard the numbers this morning that we're over 90,000. Is that right? Different people in 121 countries. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll brag for you. So
thank you.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah.
So keep doing what you're doing.
Great.
You know, we're excited to see where this goes.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for taking some time out what sounds like a very busy day.
Yeah, thank you.